The Himalayas, the world's tallest mountain range. As Earth meets the sky along this hostile terrain, powerful winds, sub-zero temperatures, and a lack of oxygen oppose virtually all forms of life. But creatures have somehow conquered these cloud-piercing peaks. And more recently, people have also taken on the world's toughest terrain. Although this enormous natural barrier shields and nurtures India's fertile lower plains, the pressure to survive at higher climbs fuels competition, pushing all who live here to the limit. These are the Himalayas, where only the toughest of creatures survive. The Himalayas run west to east across northern India, forming an arc 2,500 kilometers long. Outside Asia, no peak reaches above 7,000 meters. But along the Himalayan range, over 100 mountains exceed this height by at least 200 meters, and counting. At first sight, the Himalayas appear like any other snow-covered barren land. But this immense geological feature somehow supports one of the largest and most diverse collections of creatures on the planet. While these rugged highlands offer little direct refuge to humans, in the shadow below, over 1 billion people in India rely on the mountains for survival. As the seasons come and go, the mystery as to how these mountains fuel such a vast array of life soon becomes clear. "100 million years ago, the Indian island continent started drifting north at a rate of over 16 centimeters a year on one of the fastest moving tectonic plates in the world. Eventually, the floating mass slammed into Asia and slid beneath the stationary continent. The crumpling and uplifting of the lands above created enormous earthquakes and ultimately gave birth to the magnificent mountain range that is still rising today. At 5,000 meters above sea level, among the most treacherous and untamed mountains in the world, certain highly adapted species have made this desolate, cold desert their home. Blue sheep, also known as bharal, resemble goats rather than their woolly namesake. Living in small groups of around 20, they're active throughout the day. Winter food is so scarce, searching for hidden roots is a part of the daily routine. But the occasional stump of dried up summer grass still provides a welcome bonus. Despite their excellent camouflage and sure-footed ability, bharal still fall victim to predators. Young lambs are particularly vulnerable, especially when forced to break cover in search of a much-needed drink. But aerial hunters aren't the main threat along these snow-covered plains. Another predator prowls the peaks. And there's no limit to the size of this creature's prey. Stalking from above, the elements of surprise is all part of the snow leopard's preferred method of capture. Like many of the big cats, the snow leopard is a powerful ambush hunter. But like all mountain goats, these ibex have highly tuned senses. Their eyes lock on to the impending danger before taking evasive action. Despite having large rock-gripping padded feet and a long balance-assisting tail, this stalker stands little chance of catching one of the most agile creatures on the planet, unless it can avoid being spotted. But the snow leopard rarely goes hungry. It has a secret weapon. While most mountain goats become blind to the night, the snow leopard's excellent nocturnal vision kicks in. This advantage explains why the majority of kills take place closer to dawn and dusk. Himalayan snow leopards rarely venture higher than 5,500 meters, and it appears this oxygen-depleted altitude is the limit for another mammal that also struggles to survive in the mountains of India's most northern region, Ladakh. Following a 6-hour trek from the Himalayas' higher plains, the Changpa tribe finally reached their temporary winter base. These nomadic herders can't survive the deathly winter cold above 5,000 meters, so instead travel over 10 kilometers to reach the lower altitude plains. Even here, at 4,000 meters, in a blink of the sun, temperatures can suddenly plummet from +5 to -30 degrees Celsius. Setting up camp by one of the previous season's dry stone corrals is top of the to-do list before the bone-chilling night air creeps in. As the early morning sun takes the ambient air above freezing, baby goats that spent the night under the warm cover of canvas are returned to the herd. For centuries, nomads like 61-year-old Stanzin Somo have been herding the goats whose delicate wool supplies the Kashmir shawl industry. Newborn kids guarantee the future supply of raw wool, known as passion, so they receive special care and are always first to be tended to. The number of goats, sheep and yak a family owns defines wealth. The most well-off can possess over 1,000 animals. With trees unable to grow in this high-altitude climate, firewood is conveniently replaced by another renewable source. While his mother and father remain at camp tackling domestic duties, 18-year-old Topston heads off for the day in search of grazing to satisfy his herd of 100 hungry mouths. The harsh climate of the Ladakh Plateau forces the goats to grow an extra layer of downy fiber beneath their upper coat, producing some of the finest and most valuable wool available today. Although the lower grazing grounds aren't covered by snow like the higher plains, their short, dried grasses provide a very limited, vastly spread out resource. Topston and his herd have no option but to cover over 10 kilometers each day in search of edible pasture. It's an arduous 9-hour round trip. But the Changpa aren't the only ones forced to journey across this unforgiving land in order to survive. High above the plateau, bar-headed geese head south over the Himalayas to the warmer winter feeding grounds of northern India. But traveling over 1,500 kilometers in a single day isn't this bird's only claim to fame. It chooses to fly at an altitude few other creatures could barely imagine. And that includes man, as this bird cruises even higher than a jumbo jet. Soaring at 10,000 meters, bar-headed geese have even been spotted flying over Everest, the tallest mountain in the world. Although broader than average wings create a large uplifting surface-to-weight ratio, this species doesn't just glide with the wind. Part of its success is down to being a powerful flapper. Under their own power, bar-headed geese can fly over 80 kilometers an hour. With a tailwind, this speed can easily be doubled. At minus 35 degrees Celsius, ice build-up on their wings would normally be an issue for most birds. But the barhead's relentless flapping over the mountains produces excess body heat, which in turn acts as a de-icing mechanism. The atmosphere up here contains just a quarter of the oxygen found at sea level. But unlike other goose species, bar-headed geese have a greater number of blood capillaries servicing their wing muscles. This evolutionary trait means the limited oxygen absorbed is utilized much more efficiently. Since their creation, the Himalayas have shaped the cultures of southern Asia. Many peaks are seen as sacred, and religions such as Buddhism have a strong physical presence in the remotest of areas. Prayer flags, flapping in the wind, break the silence across the numerous mountain passes. For centuries, Buddhist pilgrims have draped these pennants across valleys and places of spiritual practice, for the wind to carry their written prayers across the landscape. Although the flags are said to bring happiness and prosperity to the flag planter, it's also believed they spread goodwill and compassion to all beings throughout the pervading space. Perched high above the valleys, isolated monastic retreats provide a permanent home for holy devotees. Also known as gompas, most Himalayan monasteries appear locked in time, having undergone little change over the past 400 years. Traditionally, the youngest son from each family is sent to join a local monastery. But for one Changpa boy back in Ladakh, this wasn't an option. With no other siblings to help tend the herd, it's down to Topston to maintain the family income. At the end of another 9-hour food trek, it's all hands on deck, as each animal is given a couple of handfuls of barley to supplement their reduced winter grazing. Finally, the day is done, and the herd huddles together inside the stone corral. Alone, they'd stand little chance of surviving the sub-zero nighttime temperature. But cold isn't the only killer roaming the valley. Namgyal, a nearby neighbor, brings news of a growing problem facing the entire Changpa community. Last night, another one of his goats was taken. In total, over 40 animals have been attacked and killed this winter. And it appears they're dealing with a number of assassins. As the Changpa retreat to lower climbs to survive the winter, the snow leopards follow. And it seems the entire plateau could now be surrounded. Swapping the warmth of the family tent for the freezing night air is a frequent chore for Topston. But a human presence is the best way to protect the herd from predatory attacks. morning comes, and it's soon apparent they've had a visitor. Drag marks offer a clear clue to which direction the assailant headed. Snow leopards usually drag their prey to a safe location before eating. But this goat is still intact, meaning one thing: the perpetrator can't be too far away. Despite their formidable reputation, snow leopards pose little direct threat to people. Unlike most of their big cat relatives, these Highland hunters have never been known to attack a human. The biggest danger at this altitude is still the cold. At this time of year, the plateau's once fast-flowing rivers become just another frozen feature. Even the region's largest ecosystems, the high-altitude lakes, take a break from their summer wetland roles as ice claims every last drop of water. Lying 4,500 meters above sea level, Saumariri isn't only one of the highest lakes in the world. At 28 kilometers long by 8 wide, it's also the largest body of water in the Indian Himalayas. Surrounded by snow-capped peaks, the lake is mainly topped up by summer meltwater. The region's rainfall adds very little, with an annual count of just 100 millimeters. With no outlet, Saumariri's already brackish water is becoming increasingly saline every year. Despite this slightly salty composition, the lake still remains completely frozen for around 4 months of the year. In the eastern part of Ladakh's Pulga Valley, steam rising from the freezing land is a stark reminder that these Himalayan mountains are no sleeping giants. Boiling hot streams point to deep fractures in the rock beneath, a continuous reminder of the tectonic collision that began 50 million years ago and that's still taking place today. The circulation of water throughout these underground faults has created over 100 thermal springs. Superheated water from reservoirs over a kilometer down rises to the surface at a temperature of 84 degrees, the reduced boiling point at this particular altitude. Just as Ladakh's hot springs provide a constant reminder of the Himalayas' creation, 400 kilometers further south lies India's greatest monument to the forces behind this magnificent range. At a cloud-caressing 7,800 meters, Nanda Devi is India's tallest mountain. Standing in a vast amphitheater, over 100 kilometers in circumference and no less than 6,000 meters high, Nanda Devi shields an unlikely Eden in the heart of the Himalayas' hostile zone. Surrounded by a circle of 600 peaks, this secret valley has its own unique microclimate. It's the end of March, and while the rest of the region continues to suffer from the crippling cold, spring has already arrived in this fertile gorge. Although known as the Valley of Flowers, it's still too early for the basin's colorful petaled plants to emerge. but the melting of snow cover is cue for another spectacle to make an appearance. Not all Asiatic black bears hibernate, but here in the colder northern parts of the world, they're forced to remain in their dens for around 4 months of the year. Despite being similar in size to its American relative, a distinctive cream-colored crescent at the center of its chest gives this Himalayan resident its unique identity. Thicker fur, up to 15 centimeters long around its neck and face, is another feature separating the two species. Armed with 5-centimeter-long curved claws and canine teeth designed for tearing meat, surprisingly, this predator is primarily a vegetarian. Berries, grasses and roots make up the majority of its diet, along with the occasional insect. With the fruits of autumn a long way off, the hunter relies on its most valuable weapon, an incredibly acute sense of smell. This nose is capable of detecting honey from over 5 kilometers away. Bugs and grubs hiding up to a meter below ground are also at risk of becoming part of this bear's breakfast. Beetles choosing the sanctuary of a rotten log stand little chance against such a highly equipped opponent. While the Valley of Flowers offers sanctuary to one of the most endangered bears in the world, Ladak's thermal springs welcomes the early arrival of one of the planet's most endangered birds. Of the 15 species of crane in the world, the black-necked crane is the only one living at such high altitude. After overwintering in large flocks in the warmer valleys of China and Tibet, they separate into breeding pairs and head north to the wetlands and lakes of the high Himalayan plateau. But even at this time of year, night temperatures can suddenly plummet. Fortunately, this particular bird doesn't just have a head for heights. It can survive temperatures down to -30. At just under 1.5 meters in height, the black-necked crane is also one of the world's tallest birds. As springtime temperatures rise, frozen rivers begin to thaw and resume their role of channeling the April snowmelt. Although just shallow streams as they leave the Himalayan plateau, on their journey towards the sea they miraculously merge to form some of the greatest and most important life-fueling rivers on the planet. The mighty river Ganges, the Indus, and the Brahmaputra all originate from tiny tributaries high up in these mountains. On their combined journey of around 10,000 kilometers, these waterways support the lives of over 1 billion people, as well as one of the planet's most diverse ecosystems. Over 1,500 kilometers east of its source, the Brahmaputra River finally reaches the Himalayan foothills of Manas. Throughout this semi-tropical terrain, temperatures rarely fall below 15 degrees, making it a haven for wildlife. Along with a multitude of reptiles and colorful birds, over 50 species of mammal can be found throughout these gentle Himalayan slopes, including India's most iconic creatures. The region's slightly higher temperate forests are also home to one of the world's most elusive animals. Red pandas are about the same size as a domestic cat and live a solitary life. Despite once being thought of as a raccoon and then a bear, they've since been allocated their own unique family label, closely related to weasels. Like their giant black and white namesakes, red pandas are unable to digest the cellulose found in most plants, so their diet is almost entirely made up of bamboo, greenery their stomachs can just about cope with. Although they spend up to 13 hours of the day eating, the spindly plants provide little nutrition. Conserving energy is crucial to this creature's survival. After marking sections of territory, it's back to the canopy for some important pampering. With fur covering its entire body, this cat-like cleaning is one activity that cannot be rushed. But if there's one thing that can entice this Himalayan tree hugger down from his perch, it's a potential mate. Male territories overlap that of several females, and although the mating season is just about over, this suitor is on a mission. Despite the male's persistence, his efforts are futile. Female red pandas are fertile for just one 24-hour window per year, usually at the beginning of spring. If this doesn't coincide with encountering a male, then she won't be receptive and will not conceive. This male will just have to hope his visitor passes by a little earlier next year. Closer to the river live a group of tree-climbing mammals that rarely face the problem of locating a mate. Gathered in tightly knit social groups of around a dozen individuals, golden langurs give birth all year round. Found only here and the neighboring foothills of Bhutan, they're one of India's most endangered primates. Unlike the red panda, langurs have a chambered stomach, which helps break down cellulose. Mature leaves and fresh buds make up the majority of their diet. Enlarged salivary glands also assist their digestion. Regardless of the vast food supply, competition over feeding still exists. Minor skirmishes can quickly get out of hand. But golden langurs have a way of leaping to their own defense. Large hind limbs provide powerful propulsion, while long padded fingers allow for effective hooking and grabbing. Langurs are one of the few primates to have all but lost their thumbs, an evolutionary adaptation to prevent the digit from being a hindrance while swinging through trees. Although a long tail enhances balance, it also requires a little more effort when it comes to cleaning. Grooming isn't just a solo affair. Rummaging through a friend's fur is the langur's way of reinforcing social bonds, as well as relieving stress. Golden langurs seldom leave the trees, even to drink. Most of their water comes from dew and rain-soaked leaves. This tactic is adopted by some of the foothills' smaller animals too, such as Himalayan squirrels that find sanctuary in the foothills' flowering rhododendron forests. More than 90% of the world's rhododendron trees originate from this very region. Sunbirds add more color to the mix as they feed on insects attracted to the springtime blossom. The Himalayan foothill trees provide safe refuge to many creatures, but there's one predator that relies on their elevated branches for its hunting success. Relatively short legs and broad paws make the clouded leopard an expert at climbing trees. Its exceptionally long tail provides excellent balance. Although it spends most of the day resting, this medium-sized stocky cat is no slumbering softy. The clouded leopard is a formidable predator, and relative to its size, it has the longest canine teeth of any living carnivore. As dusk draws in, the nocturnal hunter spots a potential victim. Rotatable rear ankle joints allow for a controlled descent, head first. Blind by night jungle fowl stand little chance against the leopard and its sharp nocturnal vision. In the high Himalayan plateau of Ladakh, Buddhist monks officially announced the arrival of spring. Defrosted streams feed the thawed-out grasslands, and the high-altitude lakes prepare themselves for the return of their summertime residents. With temperatures topping around 20 degrees above freezing, Saumariri's waters are in full melt. The high-flying bar-headed geese begin arriving from their winter base in India's lower plains, over 1,500 kilometers away. Saumariri is the only place in India where bar-headed geese come to breed. Because there are few predators at this high altitude, the lake provides the perfect summer residence for a whole variety of water birds. Shell ducks, grebes and gulls also rely on Saumariri for raising their young, making this Himalayan lake one of India's most important wetland ecosystems. With summer fast approaching, the snow leopards follow the mountain's retreating snow line. The threat to the Changpa tribe's livestock is over, and they can now begin harvesting their most valued resource. Through this ancient song, Namgyal asks the goat for good passion and to be still as he gently combs out the soft fibers from underneath. With 200 goats to comb, Namgyal hopes to collect over 150 kilograms of pashmina wool, a raw value of just over $6,000. The warmer weather allows for other age-old traditional activities, skills passed down through hundreds of generations. With the herd's new arrivals fully weaned, Stanzin draws on another of the tribe's age-old domestic techniques. Using fat from the milk and a goatskin bag, the Changpa have been producing butter this way for thousands of years. This rhythmic shaking breaks down the butterfat membranes, allowing the particles to clump together. The entire churning process takes around half an hour to complete. Bags made from sheep intestine preserves the ball's shape and keeps it clean. This way, the butter can be stored for several months. With the higher altitude plains again offering grazing pasture, the Changpa prepare to leave their winter camp. These lower pastures remain strictly out of bounds during summer, in order to guarantee a vital winter reserve. With Nanda Devi's Valley of Flowers in full summer bloom, the Himalayan mountain range appears set to release its greatest gift to the world below. As India's warm, moist summer winds head north towards mainland Asia, they suddenly hit the Himalayas' gigantic natural barrier. Forced upwards, these vast vapor clouds condense. Dumping billions of liters of rain on the parched ground below. These short-lived summer monsoons provide over 70% of India's annual rainfall. Over 200 million farmers rely on this rain to grow their crops and in turn feed a nation of over 1 billion people. If it weren't for the Himalayas, India would effectively be a drought-ridden giant desert. The Himalayas are a hostile wilderness that challenge all who venture their snowy slopes. But these mammoth mountains also have a positive effect on climate, supporting the lives of an endless number of creatures, including one of the largest populations of people on the planet.